Einen schönen Nachmittag aus dem Vereinigten Königreich von Großbritannien und Nordirland, das in der Zwischenzeit Italien als Europameister der Pandemie überholt und abgelöst hat. Danke, dass Sie unsere Tür gefunden haben, unseren virtuellen Eingang. Mein Name ist Christian Käsberger, ich leite das Büro der Wirtschaftskammer hier seit Anfang 2016, wenn Sie sich erinnern, das war ein paar Monate vor dem Referendum der Briten über einen Austritt aus der Europäischen Union. Die Entscheidung haben wir damals 3 Jahre lang für einen der großen gesellschaftlichen, ökonomischen und politischen Umbrüche der Nachkriegszeit in Europa gehalten, bis das Coronavirus den Brexit auf ein Zwergenproblemchen zurückgesetzt hat. Für die, die es interessiert, er kommt wahrscheinlich, er wird vermutlich auch mehr oder weniger über den Rand gebrochen werden. Die britische Regierung hat den A versprochen und B ist sie jetzt der Auffassung, dass die schmerzhaften und unter Umständen politisch gefährlichen wirtschaftlichen Folgen eines wenig gut verhandelten Brexit, wie er uns ins Haus steht, in den Folgen der Pandemie völlig unbemerkt untergehen werden. Ich heiße Sie herzlich willkommen bei einer Veranstaltung zum Thema Flexibility, Flexible Working and Beyond. Wobei würde ich jetzt Beyond unterstreichen. Es geht heute weniger um Arbeitszeit und Arbeitszeitmodelle, sondern um einen holistischeren, um einen konzeptiven Zugang zu einem neuen Denk-, Arbeits- und Lebensmodell, das uns unter Umständen auch erlaubt, die auf uns zukommenden Probleme und Herausforderungen besser und schneller zu lösen, als uns das in der Vergangenheit gelungen ist. Vielleicht ein paar Worte zur Pandemiesituation in Großbritannien. Ein weißer Elefant im Raum. Die Briten haben weit über 200.000 bestätigte Infektionen und 32.000 Tote. Damit ist die Wahrscheinlichkeit, am Virus in Großbritannien zu sterben, auch wenn man die Bevölkerungsverhältnisse zwischen Großbritannien und Österreich berücksichtigt, ungefähr 8-mal so hoch als in Österreich. Viele Gründe, die es dafür gibt, ein sehr zögerlicher Ansatz der britischen Regierung. Noch im Brexit-Taumel hat man sich irgendwie die gute Stimmung nicht verderben lassen wollen. Dazu kommt ein grundsätzlich schlechtes und seit einem Jahrzehnt kaputt gespartes Gesundheitssystem in Großbritannien. Eine Bevölkerungsdichte, die um 4-mal größer ist als in Österreich, für ein Virus, das von der Nähe lebt, ein fruchtbarer Nährboden, aber natürlich auch der Umstand, dass das soziale Netz hier dünn gestrickt ist und dass die sozialen Ungleichgewichte massiv sind und damit sehr viele Menschen, die ökonomisch in einer weniger guten Situation sind, grundsätzlich noch anfälliger für eine Erkrankung, für eine Infektion waren, als das vielleicht bei uns der Fall ist. Die Kurve der Neuinfektionen, der Todesfälle, der Spitalsaufnahmen ist flach, aber weit von einem kontrollierbaren Niveau entfernt. Insofern ist auch an einen Neustart der Wirtschaft oder an eine Rücknahme der eher drakonischen Zwangsmaßnahmen nicht zu denken. Der Premierminister hat gestern in einer sehnlichst erwarteten Ansprache, außer dass von nun an Sonnenbaden erlaubt wäre im Park, nicht viel Neues zu erzählen gehabt. Mit einer Öffnung der Schulen in einer sehr bescheidenen Version wird frühestens Anfang Juni gerechnet mit einer Öffnung der Hotellerie und der Gastronomie, wenn überhaupt Anfang Juli. Wir haben uns in den vergangenen Wochen natürlich auf das Krisenmanagement konzentriert, hier am Außenwirtschaftscenter London. Wir haben versucht, vornehmlich die Niederlassungen, aber auch viele der österreichischen Exporteure dabei zu unterstützen, diese Situation in den Griff zu bekommen. Da ging es um Unterstützung bei arbeitsrechtlichen Fragen, Inanspruchnahme von Wirtschaftshilfen und Themen, die sehr stark mit der Akutsituation der Pandemie, mit den Auswirkungen auf den Fluss auf den Fluss der Wirtschaft in Verbindung standen. Aber wir haben in der Vergangenheit die Sonderstellung Londons auch immer für ganz andere Themen, für eine ganz andere Angebotsschiene genützt. Denken Sie daran, London hat 9 Millionen Einwohner, damit mit Abstand die größte europäische Metropole. Die Stadt ist eines der 2 großen weltweiten Finanzzentren. Fast jedes große, namhafte Multinational-Unternehmen dieser Welt hat hier seinen Firmensitz, eine Europazentrale, einen Think Tank oder irgendeine andere signifikante unternehmerische Präsenz. Und damit war die Dichte oder ist die Dichte und die Tiefe der akademischen und unternehmerischen Auseinandersetzung mit Zukunftsthemen, technologischen Zukunftsthemen, Managementthemen hier größer als anderswo. Und wir haben in der Vergangenheit das für Learning Journeys, für Führungskräfte genützt und nützen es jetzt für ein Veranstaltungsangebot. Da hat es ein paar Themen gegeben, die wir schon bespielt haben, darunter Corporate Learning aus dem Homeoffice oder im Homeoffice. Das ist ein Webinar, das Sie auf unserem YouTube-Channel heute nachhören und nachschauen können. Und wir kommen mit einem ganz spannenden Angebot auf Sie zu. Am 14.05. Branding in der Krise, also Markenführung in der Krise. Da geht es um das Thema, dass Konsumenten Unternehmen eine große Bedeutung bei der Bewältigung der Pandemie zuweisen und sehr darauf schauen werden, ob in diesen entscheidenden Monaten die jeweiligen Markenversprechen auch erfüllt werden. Und diese Konsumenten sind, wie wir aus Untersuchungen zu dem Thema, aus Umfragen dazu bereits wissen, bereit zu belohnen, aber auch bereit zu bestrafen. Und beim zweiten Thema am 26.05. geht es um Innovation in der Krise, um Innovation, immer sozusagen eine Braut der Krise. Es hat immer gut funktioniert, wenn die Rahmenbedingungen schlechter wurden, hat man sich auf Neues gestürzt, um irgendwas Besseres herbeizuführen. Hier geht's, das ist eine Veranstaltung, die wir gemeinsam aufgesetzt haben mit unseren Kooperationspartnern vom Imperial College. Es geht um Design Thinking, also einen holistischen Zugang zur Ideenfindung im Unternehmen, die es Teams erlauben soll, nicht nur neue Produkte und neue Dienstleistungen zu finden, die geeignet sind, mit den neuen Rahmenbedingungen fertig zu werden, sondern unter Umständen auch in den alten Produkten und Dienstleistungen neue Werte zu entdecken, die man an die Oberfläche befördern könnte. Und im Juni, am 3., 8. und 18. gibt es eine Serie von Technologieangeboten, Technologie-Webinaren, die wir gemeinsam mit unseren Kollegen in New York und München abwickeln. Da werden 3 Themen angesprochen. Die Krise als Treiber von Immersive Technologies. Da geht es um Virtual, Augmented and Mixed Reality. Dann die Digitalisierung der Lieferketten und additive Fertigungsmethoden, die jeweils von der Krise schneller und in andere Richtungen getrieben werden, als wir sie sozusagen vor Corona prognostiziert und festgestellt haben. Mit diesem Hinweis danke ich Ihnen nochmals für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit und für Ihren Besuch. Ich darf die Vorstellung unserer Vortragenden, Annie Auerbach, die bei einer sehr spannenden Veranstaltung der British Chamber persönlich kennengelernt habe und der ich zugehört habe und fasziniert von der Gedankenwelt war, die sie aufgebaut hat. Die Vorstellung und Moderation der Veranstaltung darf ich meiner Freundin und Kollegin Renate Schnutt überlassen, die dieses Webinar auch konzipiert und vorbereitet hat. Von meiner Seite bleiben Sie gesund, sorgen Sie dafür, dass andere gesund bleiben. Keep calm, keep your spirits up und ich hoffe auf ein Wiedersehen bald, irgendwann einmal wieder von Angesicht zu Angesicht hier in London oder irgendwo in Österreich. Herzlichen Dank.
Ja, vielen lieben Dank, Christian, für die Eingangsworte. Hello and good afternoon from my side. Before we take a deep dive into our today's topic and introducing Annie Auerbach, I would like to share a few words on the technical aspects of our webinar today. So the webinar will last for approximately an hour. You can ask questions all the time. Please use the chat function below, which is embedded in our webinar tool. So we will answer the questions today within our webinar. If we're running out of time, we will answer them via email immediately afterwards. So now I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Annie Auerbach. Annie Auerbach is writer and co-founder of the UK trends agency Starling. And her book Flex inspired me for the 2 days webinar. And this reveals a new approach on living and working on your own terms. Today, we will discuss how to practice flex in a time of flux. Annie has worked flexibly for more than 20 years, so you can call her a flex pro in a way. She founded Starling 4 years ago. This is her own agency. Her agency Starling helps to understand socio-cultural change so that brands can be more relevant and do better, of course. The clients of her agency are, for example, Nike, Google, Unilever, and so on. Annie, I'm very excited to welcome you to our virtual meeting room.
Hi, Renata. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, great. And you have an incredible bio. And could you please reveal a little bit of what is your professional background and tell me a bit more about you?
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here, and thank you for that little intro as well. Yes, of course, I'll tell you a bit more about myself. Last year, I wrote the book Flex. It's a revolutionary guide to living and working on your own terms. It's published by HarperCollins, and here's the book here. The reason why I worked so hard to write this book is because for 20 years, I have been working flexibly myself in various different guises. So whether that be part-time work or working remotely from home or having a portfolio career, doing a number of same things at once. And it's been so difficult. I wanted to write the book to give advice that I never had 20 years ago. So that's why I interviewed some of the best and most interesting pioneers in the world of flexible working from all around the world to get that advice for people in order to make their journey a little bit more smooth than my journey has been. And I'll give you a little bit more info about my day job as well. So you said that I founded Starling, which is right. So Starling is an agency I founded with a partner 4 years ago, and we specialize in cultural insight. In other words, we specialize in understanding big societal change, understanding global trends, and helping businesses like the ones I have up here understand how to be more relevant and how to understand people better. And so much of the insights that I was getting in my day job, whether it be from sociologists, from technology experts, from gender historians, helped me understand that flex as an idea was reaching a tipping point, and it was something that was pretty urgent in our society. I didn't know how urgent, because clearly the situation we're all living in at the moment is incredibly uncertain, and flexible working has clearly become a necessity. But prior to that, when I was writing the book, I really felt an urgency that was coming at it from all these different angles, and so that's why I wrote the book.
So to kick off entirely, I would like to discuss the overall understanding of flex as a concept. So the switch from business as usual to living through a pandemic has happened very, very quickly. Many of us felt lost in this world of uncertainty, unsteadiness. So flexible working has gone from the exception to more or less the rule for most of us. So what is in the very core of the flex concept?
Absolutely. Well, so the situation that we currently find ourselves, as you say, so many businesses have pivoted from flexible working being something which was maybe a privilege for the few to something which most of us, if we are in the line of business which allows it, are trying to grapple through. And I don't know if you remember this broadcast from the BBC, which happened in March 2017.
I do.
Do you remember it? It was when Professor Robert Kelly, he's an American political analyst based in talking about inter-Korean affairs, and his daughter and his little baby kid walk in, And at the time, it was a source of great hilarity to watch that, but also a source of reality for many of us who are flex working. And I think now most of us are experiencing this, that if we are working at home, the reality of being surrounded by family, if you have children, you need to be aware that you need to help them with schooling. If you're alone, the loneliness and the isolation can get to you as well. But essentially, this thing, which seemed very sort of hilarious at the time, has now become a norm for us all. And if I tell you a little bit about, if you rewind, and why I wrote the book, why I believed there was so much societal urgency around the idea of flexibility, it was coming at me from lots of different angles. So for a start, demographically, we're living longer lives, and that means our careers are longer as well. Often in many countries, the retirement age is going up. Which means that as technology changes, we need to think about longer careers where we have to pivot and change our skills and think about how we can have sustainable careers. The second thing is, of course, the environmental crisis. And we think a lot about sustainability. We think about journeys and flying around the world and how we can make our working lives more sustainable. We also think about changing ideals of success. So within the last 10 years, we've seen a really significant rise of burnout, of really long working hours, of presenteeism at work. And there's a sense that young people coming into the workforce don't really envy their bosses. They don't look upwards necessarily and say, that's where I want to be, because they have different ideals of success, which are much more about work and life balancing out. And we're also, because of the technology is giving us the tools, we're able to monitor ourselves, understand our productivity, when we work best, how we're sleeping, what our stress levels are like. So again, technology is helping us think, are these the right ways of working and how can we change them? We're also looking at changing family structures, so more women, of course, globally in the workforce. What does that mean in terms of how the balance of work is being done at home and at the office or at the workplace? And then finally, COVID-19 and lockdown has tipped all of these societal forces into the mainstream. And it's a terribly anxious time. It's a worrying time. It's a time that many of us are suffering from worry or indeed grief. And within all of this, we're trying to grapple with these new ways of working. And because these drivers of flexibility are coming from all different angles, I very deliberately, when I wrote the book, didn't want to purely talk just about work here. Because for me, flex is a bigger idea than simply working part-time. It's about your future and future-proofing it, so that as you have a longer career, you can carry on working and developing your skills. It's about, of course, your work, but it's also about your body, and it's also about your mind and your creativity. And I wrote a whole chapter on flex in the home, because I think flexibility and gender balance is really important, and I know we're going to be talking about that later. So that's why my concept of flex is bigger than purely workplace. And I know that we shortcut to that when we think about flexible working, when we think about flexibility, but I also want to broaden our minds and see how flexibility can be an approach to life in a holistic way. There are also some new ways of working. When we do think about flexibility, we tend to shortcut, and I think this happens rather a lot. We tend to shortcut to part-time working or working from home, but very deliberately I wanted to broaden our horizons when we think about the definition of flexible working itself, because there's so many different ways that we can think about flexible working. Clearly now we're all obsessed with trying to make working from home work as an idea, but we also need to understand, and this is why I've almost written a glossary of very different ideas of what flexible working can be, the plethora of different manifestations that flexible work can take. So for example, job sharing, two people sharing the work of one job, flexi hours, where you work maybe core amount of hours in the office, and some you work remotely, wherever that may be. Location flex, which is where you can work wherever you like. One-off flex, you can adapt to unforeseen circumstances and your business trusts you to do that. And then I've listed a lot more, which I won't go through here, but I really just wanted to make sure that when we're thinking about flexible working, we're not just shortcutting to one particular type, but when understanding that the notion of flexible working is flexible in itself and has all these different ideas contained within it.
Indeed, we have the perfect weather for flex, I would say. And honestly, I was not aware that we have this kind of this bunch of options here. Could you please outline the benefits of this approach a little bit more specifically? So how could the actual impact look like in the daily business?
Sure. I think that because we're all going through it at the moment, we all have a tendency to think about this as, oh dear, we have to try and make it work. And we forget that actually the studies, the academic studies that have been done on flexible working show that there's these huge benefits. It's not just something we need to do right now, but actually if we take it forward, it can have these huge benefits both for the employer and for the employee. So there's been plenty of studies which show, and this is counter to what I think the majority of working cultures say, that working from home actually increases productivity. I think many managers worry that working from home is shirking from home, and there's been a lot of kind of negative associations associated with flexible working, but actually productivity is higher, retention is higher. So when you offer flexible working, you're really doing that in exchange for loyalty. Because it means that you trust your employee, and your employee will stay with you for longer. And of course, then you cut the costs of having to advertise and fill that position again. Staff motivation goes up. You also increase the number of women in senior positions when you offer flexible working, which then can address the gender pay gap. You reduce business costs, of course. So there's so many businesses that are starting to see that if remote working works, then paying these huge rent costs for real estate right in the center of the city, does that mean is that a good decision anymore? And of course, if you have a more flexible office space, it means you can reduce your costs in terms of the lights don't have to be on all the time, and the heating and so on as well. So there's a reduction of business costs, but also, and I think this is paramount, it impacts positively employee well-being in all sorts of ways. So people report feeling more productive, as I say, but also feeling happier, feeling better. So there's huge health benefits of flexibility. A review of 10 studies carried out by researchers at Durham University shows that mental health, blood pressure, sleep patterns were better amongst people who could determine their own working hours. So in other words, the autonomy over your timetable allows you to feel better.
So COVID-19 seems to be an outside trigger. If done right, businesses will soon are already benefiting from flexible working in terms of productivity, you mentioned, engagement, lower costs, and so on. What do companies need to do to actually get there, assuming we don't have this force from the outside? And who is it for? Because it's obviously more than having technology in place.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good question. So to address who is Flex for, first of all, flexibility, and I mentioned this in my book. This is a quote on the left-hand side from my book. For too long, it's been ghettoized, label a mum thing, a women's issue which needs to be solved by women. And from the research that I've done and all the experts that I've spoken to, flexibility is beneficial across all stratas of society. And it's, so therefore, who is it for? It's for all of us. So it's for Gen Zs, young people entering the workforce, and their aspirations are around flexibility and diversity. In fact, in terms of what motivates them to join a business, if that business is flexible and diverse, that trumps the salary in terms of what's attracting them. millennials as well, who aspire to portfolio careers or side hustles. So in other words, if they have many strings to their bow, they might really appreciate the flexibility to work in one business, but also be able to follow those passions on the side. And also, it's been shown that the creativity associated with side hustles is fed back into the mother business, if you like. So there is a circle of these things. It's not that these people are lost to you or they're 1 foot outside the door. In fact, their creativity is fed back into the mother business. Of course, parents, not just mums, parents of both genders who want a more family-friendly existence really benefit from flexibility, particularly in countries where childcare is expensive, like the UK, and very rigid. So, so to be able to have flex at the beginning and end of the day, it means a huge amount and would actually incentivize huge loyalty in those people. Gen Xers, who as the sandwich generation, in other words, they're looking after both little kids and also perhaps caring for elderly parents, would benefit for this, because flex for carers is hugely beneficial. And also over 50s who are perhaps being drawn into childcare just at the moment they want to pivot or retrain or go part-time or create longer sustainable careers. So you can see how I've tried to draw a picture of how flexible working can actually create an inclusive workplace for all these different types of worker. And my ambition with it, and with many of the flex pioneers that I've spoken to, is that if we can genuinely create flexible workplaces, then we will create inclusive workplaces which have wide variety of people, wide variety of perspectives, and the business and the innovation and the creativity will benefit from that.
And normally the force is coming from inside the company. Now we had this trigger from outside. Is there anything how companies can install this new concept? Because I think it needs to be integrated in the values of a company and so on and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all very well saying, off you go, flexible working, but how do we shift working cultures that for so long have been built upon long working hours, presenteeism, everyone being in the same place at the same time? And I think, as you say, this needs to be a longer term thing, not just a pivot at a time of crisis. One of the things that I think needs to be there is trust. And it's shown that when you have high trust in an organization, actually there's less stress and less burnout as well. And trust has always been built, I think, on the fact that we can see each other face to face and we are next to each other and we can, walk along the corridor and have a little chat with somebody to make sure they're doing that thing, or have they spoken to this person about that, and so on. So trust has been built on face-to-face being present. And in order for flexible working to work and to be sustainable, we need to build new models of trust. And that doesn't mean surveying people. In other words, checking up on them. Are you doing X, Y, and Z, or so on? It's actually giving them very clear objectives about what needs to be done. So we need to, when we remote work and when we manage a team who are working from home, we need to be super clear about our objectives for, I would say, the week rather than from each day. Because as you know, everybody's circumstances will be slightly different. Some people will be trying to look after their kids at the same time, and so on. So if we're very clear on weekly goals, and then we're clear about when they have to be delivered and timelines for that, that then makes everybody understand, get on the same page, and trust is built. I think the second thing is really knowing each other very well. And so it's not just about everybody getting on a Zoom call, because I think that we've been doing a lot of Zooming during during lockdown, and I completely understand why. because we feel instinctively that we want to see each other. And Zoom is really good for certain things, but in other respects, we need to get on the telephone and actually speak to somebody individually, ask how they are, and if they understand what needs to be done, and so on. So we need to, and then actually some form of comms might be great on a Slack channel where everybody can see it. It's sort of like a notice board and everybody can see it in comments. So think really intelligently about different forms of communication and what's suited for what purpose. My other thing is that if we think in terms of outputs rather than in terms of inputs. So I guess in the past, we've always thought of somebody's value to the business is how much time they are putting into a task, how many hours they're working, and the productivity of those hours. And instead, I think we need to shift from input to output. So what is that person producing? What is the goal for the week? And are they delivering on that? And that, in a way, frees us from relying on presenteeism as a way of trusting somebody, and instead trust them because of what they deliver and what they bring to the business. So yes, that's my advice on how to think of trust in a new way and to make flexible working practices bed in and remain sustainable.
I would like to talk about another buzzword here, what definitely ended up in my collection of takeaways after reading your book. So it was the attention economy, and I would like to cite at this point a passage out of your book, because it was like every 24 hours people are bombarded with an enormous amount of information. That amount would overload a laptop within a week. The currency of today is the ability to attract attention in an environment of perma-distraction. So how do we deal with that? How can businesses stay successful in such an challenging environment? And what are the skills according to your findings in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the chapters of the book was, as you say, all around the future and how can we develop the right skills of the future. And you're absolutely right. We live in a world where we're absolutely bombarded of information. And I think that's happening at an even greater pace at the moment. We're living through an infodemic. In other words, we're bombarded with information about the virus itself. A lot of us are addicted 24/7 to news cycles and to hearing about what's the latest. But also, as you say, generally, in terms of our entertainment, our consumption, our shopping, we're bombarded with information all the time. And what we need to do is actually, particularly when we're working from home, is develop some sense of clarity and to retain creativity rather than just listen to someone else's agenda and what's popping up in our inbox. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Flex Your Mind, which is one of the chapters of my book. I love this quote from Dr. Seuss: think left and think right, think high and think low and think high. Oh, the thinks you can think up if only you try. The reason why I focused on this is that the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report predicts that creativity, innovation, and ideation will be key skills for the workforce of the future. And as you've described, we're actually living in a world where it's incredibly hard to be creative because we have an onslaught of information banging away at us. It's very hard to create fresh thinking and innovative thoughts when we are constantly reacting to the agenda of an outside world. Almost half of today's jobs may be replaced by automation in the next 20 years. So surely what we should be doing is really nurturing our humanity, is the thing that really distinguishes us from AI. So nurturing what makes us human, our creative skills, our collaborative skills. Yet, as we've discussed, some working cultures are forcing humans to be more like robots when we really focus so hard on faster, on higher outputs, on greater uniformity. We're kind of adopting machine values as our own, rather than nurturing our own creativity and humanity. And of course, this treating people like machines has impacted our stress levels and our mental health, and we can see the rise of burnout. The World Health Organization has identified burnout as one of the things that it's very concerned with in terms of workplace worries. So when we think about the future and what the skills of the future are, we know that there's so many jobs that will exist for our kids, and we don't even know what they might be like. So 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet, says the Institute for the Future. What might these jobs be? Are they drone traffic controls, end-of-life coaches, telesurgeons, techno-ethicists? That's some of the ideas that I came up with when I was thinking about what potential jobs might be. But actually, we don't particularly know, and I want to spend a little bit of time on what I think is the key skill for us all to develop now, this key skill for the future, and that is adaptability, the ability to learn and relearn and reskill. And the reason why I think it's so important is I'm borrowing a model from Heather E. McGowan on the left-hand side here, who's a future of learning and work expert. And what she has really clearly defined, I think, is something that instinctively we're all living through, which is an old paradigm whereby, as you can see, we educated ourselves right at the beginning of our lives. We invested all that knowledge into our heads, and then we spent that knowledge at work over the period of a very kind of stable working life, where perhaps we would climb the career ladder, and success looked like getting to the top of that ladder. And then at a certain point, we would retire and we would swap into a life of leisure. And our human life expectancy was around 70 to 75. Whereas now, in the emergent reality, we have a longer human life expectation. And we are starting to realize that learning needs to take place throughout our lives, because technology is changing so quickly and science is changing so quickly that we can't rely on the skills we learned 20 years ago, 30 years ago to see us through our entire working lives. And in fact, our working lives are becoming more wiggly like this, because we are changing career, we are sidestepping, we're not necessarily climbing up, a very linear thing. We have less linear milestones, in fact. And there's not such a transition from a working life to a life of leisure. In fact, there's a real desire as we age to remain engaged. And that might not be in exactly the same type of work we've done throughout our lives. That might be in the charitable sector, or that might be in a different, more entrepreneurial sector, the rise of entrepreneurs, for example, in later life. But all of that means that adaptability, the ability to pivot, to make the most of opportunities, to skill and reskill, and not fear change, but actually fear not changing, is a really important skill to develop, that I think is at the heart of flexibility, really. And so that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. And I just love this quote from Heather E. McGowan. She says, "Stop asking a young person what you want to be when you grow up. It freezes their identity into a job that may not be there. Ask them how you want to be when you grow up." And that really spoke to me, because I think I have two children, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, who are currently homeschooling. And a lot of how traditional education has actually fostered a more of a linear path, which is, you know, I was asked so many times when I was younger, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was a real thing that adults ask children. And it seems to me that as we know the world is changing so much, it really is helpful to actually embed the skills of how to be creative, how to collaborate, how to question, how to learn. It's less about putting knowledge in one's head and more about learning how to learn, because that's a skill that I'll take through the rest of my career. And Alvin Toffler, the futurist, put it beautifully when he said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn."
I especially liked the quote before, because I will now be very conscious about what I'm going to ask children, because this is such a revelation to me. Annie, you are a working woman like me, and our professional lives have similar challenges and obstacles simply due to the fact that we are women. A part in your book is dedicated to gender-related issues. It would be great if you could share a few thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, sure. So I wrote a whole chapter of the book which was about flex in the home, because I felt very strongly that as much as we could talk all we like about gender balance in the workplace and flexibility in the workplace, if we don't look at gender balance within the home as well, we're missing a trick, because it's just simply not possible. So I wrote a whole chapter which is called Flex Your Home. I quoted Cher, who's one of my favorites. Mother told me a couple of years ago, "Sweetheart, settle down and marry a rich man." I said, "Mum, I am a rich man." And what I focused on in this chapter is really understanding and unpicking what's called the emotional load, which is the invisible work of caring and running a household, and the housework, the chores, all of the work and the mental acuity that goes into caring for family and caring for a home. And in order to do that, I wanted to unpick it and understand why it is that more women do more work in the home. And one of the things we try and understand when we look at cultural insight is understand the culture that surrounds us, that's invisible and really hard to see. And if you look at this analysis of British TV advertisements for toys that came out in 2015, and if you look at the left-hand side, you can see that there is, for one gender, the words that were used over and over again were blast, adventure, control, battle, power, explore, awesome. And on the other side of another gender, it was beautiful, magic, princess, sparkly, and so on. And I'll leave it up to you to guess which was the boys' toys advertising and which was the girls' toys advertising. But actually, that's not just an interesting analysis of discourse, of language used in advertising. It actually has a huge impact, because girls are socialized from an early age to be beautiful and to have these more domestic ambitions, whereas boys to have ambitions around adventure, power, and control. And so when we're looking at unconscious bias tests, 75% associate man with work and women with family. At ages 7 to 11, boys are almost twice as likely as girls to want to be scientists, and 57% of girls aged 7 to 10 think girls are better at doing chores at home than boys. So all of this, these stats show how the way we've been brought up, and globally the way we've been brought up, has created a set of expectations and aspirations which are significant. And Melinda Gates has done quite a bit of work on this, and she says that girls who grow up to be working women tend to be women who carry the domestic load at home. So Melinda Gates says that women on average spend 7 more years doing the unpaid, unrecognized, undervalued household work than men over their lifetimes. So it does really have an impact when it comes to flexibility in the home. And when I looked into the academic literature around housework, I did quite a lot of nerdy academic report reading on housework. I found that it's not just based on earnings. So you might say if one partner earns more than the other, then maybe the other partner will pick up the domestic slack and make sure that the household chores are done, or the dentist appointment is booked, or checking up on the mother-in-law, and so on. Because actually women who out-earn their partners still do more work in the home. So where the woman is the breadwinner, the more she earns, the less her partner might do in the house, which is a really intriguing thing to unpick. And what I've noticed in reading a lot of articles around how we're coping with COVID is that women are picking up quite a lot of the emotional load at home still, even though we're both working from home. So it's something that really requires a lot of thinking, because of course when we address that, we can address the gender balance at work. And the problem lies that if 75% of us associate man with work and woman with family, you have the problem of women leaving the workplace, you have a lack of female leadership, you have issues with the gender pay gap, the talent pipeline, and women ending up bearing all of the emotional load. So this is why I think it's a bigger societal thing that can benefit men and women and all of society.
And do you think the current situation is contributing to make these circumstances more visible, or to help to create more transparency into the circumstances we have in our, because the private and the public sphere are crossing the path?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a really good point, because a lot of this emotional load, which is stuff, as I say, like the chores at home, but also the invisible stuff, which is remembering that your kid needs a dress-up outfit for a play, or remembering that a friend is going through a hard time, and all of this stuff. When we're all locked down at home, that invisible work becomes visible, as you say, so we can see the realities of what it means to make life happen, and to care for our parents, our kids, the people around us, our friends, and so on. So I think there is more of a visibility, but I'm not sure, and it's too early really to tell whether that's translating into a equitable sharing of the load. So yes, visibility, yes, probably more friction, and how do we navigate through that? And also, how can workplaces acknowledge it and help as well?
We are already, time is flying, we are already moving on towards the end of our webinar. So I'm a huge fan of takeaways. To sum up, what is your main advice for our audience out there?
Sure. Well, what I would say is that we absolutely all need flexibility. And my hope is that despite these terrible circumstances everybody is working through now, that some of the practices that we're adopting will be sustained and will remain and will be longer term solutions, because we all do need flexibility. Men need the flexibility to be good fathers, women need the flexibility to share the work of the home, we all need it, older people need it, younger people need it, we all need it to free up our mental and emotional bandwidth and progress our careers, our friendships, our health and well-being. So that in a way is a kind of societal huge benefit. And if I was to say how we should get there, how to make flex actually work, my feeling is that there's no one size fits all solution for any sector or business or individual. And the nature of flex is that each business and each category that business operates in will have different working cultures, different biases, different needs, different rhythms, different barriers. And then each individual working at that business will have a set of needs that will evolve throughout their careers. So my needs won't be the same as they will be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So solutions regarding flex themselves need to be flexible. That's something that we need to go into it. Having said that, what can we actually do to make flex work? Well, we can challenge working cultures, which are all around high stress, presenteeism, longer working hours, bums on seats. And we can move towards higher trust working cultures, where we really get to know our colleagues and we understand who they are, and we communicate clearly, and we have a vision which is around outputs rather than inputs. One of the tips I really like and I talk about in my book is the notion of leaving loudly, which is that more senior members of the team can demonstrate flexibility as a superpower almost. And when we all go back to the office, when we do, if senior members of the team leave loudly, in other words, say goodbye, I'm going home, I have to go to my kids' piano recital, or I just want to go home and cook dinner for my partner, or whatever it is, then that allows a sense of permission and also a sense of aspiration. So if the senior people are doing it, then it's aspirational too. I would say beware flexism. I haven't used that word yet, but flexism is the prejudice that we're shirking from home, that people who flex aren't ambitious necessarily, or have, one foot out the door. And we should really be aware that that exists, and we should challenge it, which is why it's really great if we tell stories about the amazing people within our businesses that are practicing flexible working, and it's really succeeding. I would say use technology well. So when you are managing remote working teams, don't just always go to Zoom, think about different solutions so we don't all get Zoom fatigue. I would say help with the emotional node, acknowledge that there is this thing going on. Is there any way? Some of the most innovative businesses are actually saying, well, can I help my employees with that? And can I take some of that load off their shoulders? And finally, this is a plea for individuals as well. And it's something that I feel strongly about, which is flexibility can seem like a soft word, can seem like a pliable word, that you're doing as much as possible and you're bending over backwards. And I think it's a very, very strong word. And I believe that flexibility needs to have hard edges and boundaries as well. The last thing any of us want to be doing is swapping the 9 to 5 for the 24/7 and constantly be tethered to our phones, to our emails. So actually we take the old habits and apply them to a new world. And so I would say that flexibility needs to have sharp edges, and we need to stop, we need to walk away, we need to have a walk, take a breath of fresh air, we need to turn off our devices to make sure that we don't, that we learn the lessons and we try and move forward in a really sustainable way.
Tying into this, what you've said, because there is now a question arising, what advice would you offer to people who find them in a 24 hours home office at the moment? Because home office per se is not flexible working, and how can you use it as a start to get there?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of us are experiencing this, that also because we're working from home, there's a sense that we want to prove that we are there and we're available and we're working hard. I think actually it's about what I was trying to say, which is about having hard edges, which is there's great benefits to working from home, which means we can stop, which means that we can trust ourselves, we can plan our days, we can say, you know what, at this point of the day, my own particular circadian rhythm means that I'm not very productive. So, for example, you might be a morning lark, or you might be a night owl. You might have your more productive hours of the day at the end or at the beginning. And so the more you know yourself, the more you can say, actually, I'm not going to be productive if I just sit in this one room all day long. Actually, what I can do is I can do my more routine tasks when I'm less productive, and I can do my more creative tasks when I am. And I would say, put the computer away, move away. It depends where you're working in your house. Not all of us have the luxury of a home office. Sometimes we're working on the kitchen table, sometimes we're working on the side of a bed, but whatever it is, put the machine away, put the device away, try and get some fresh air and get outside as well, because all of that is about creativity and having ideas, and making sure that you're not a slave to virtual presenteeism.
There's another question similar to the first one. Often people have the problem that flex work also means to be available 24/7. So it's important to find a way to switch between work and family or other modes of activity. Do you have any suggestions to manage that? Maybe we just see this in a corporate framing a little bit more. I think this...
Yeah, for sure. I think that what I have noticed that's very different in the current way of working under lockdown is that the transitions that we had in our lives have disappeared. So we used to have a transition which was a commute, where we commuted from the office to back home again. And that commute would give our brain space to decompress and to move from work life to family life. Whereas now everything is overlaid and on top of each other, and there is no room for transition. And I'm finding it really difficult because I'll go from this to going downstairs to helping my daughters with their homework. Then I'll start cooking. And the whole thing is very choppy and overlapped. So I do empathize that it doesn't really give your brain time to move slowly onto the next task. I would say that it helps to, if you are, the question was about kids as well, I think. And I said, if you are, sorry, go ahead, Renata.
More or less switching between professional life within my home and my private life, also within my home. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have talked about going for a walk, and I write about it in the book, because walking meetings, there's so many really interesting professional uses of the walking meeting, because it's been shown that when we walk, we have more ideas than when we sat down, when we live sedentary existences. And so being able to get up and even have a very short walk, if you're allowed to, wherever you are in the world at the moment, can actually give you that transition time, which will allow your brain to move from work mode into family mode. And I think the other thing is just go easy on yourself. It's really difficult right now, and we've never lived through these conditions, and we have a lot of expectations of ourselves and a lot of worries and anxieties. It's not going to be perfect. Just isn't. So if we can be kind to ourselves and be empathetic to our co-workers and understand that all of us are going through, in a way it's leveling because everybody's going through exactly the same thing, but in a way it's not, because we're not. We have different circumstances at home in terms of our private lives. And I think we just need to be kind to one another and understand that things are not rigid and can't be machine-like, and our productivity isn't like that. It's something that we're adapting our way through. So there's no easy solutions, but take a walk.
take a walk, yeah, always a good idea. We're approaching the end of our webinar already. Annie, it was a great pleasure to have you here in our virtual room. Thank you so much for your contribution and your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And ich werde nun auf Deutsch wieder wechseln, um eine kurze Eventvorschau bereitzustellen für die nächsten Webinare. Wir haben eine Serie an Webinaren zu Management-Themen bereits abgewickelt am 28.04., wie bereits erwähnt, Corporate Learning im Homeoffice. Diese Aufzeichnung ist auch bereits auf YouTube verfügbar. Auch das heutige Webinar wird natürlich aufgenommen und auf YouTube hochgeladen. Für den 14. Mai gibt es ein Webinar zum Thema Branding in der Krise. Dieses wird stattfinden zwischen 16 und 17 Uhr. Anmeldungen sind nach wie vor möglich. Michael Gray, mein Kollege, wird sich den strategischen Ansätzen für heute und morgen zum Thema Markenführung widmen. Was wir auch noch in der Pipeline haben, ist am 26. Mai ein Webinar zu dem Thema Innovation in der Krise. Hier wird mein lieber Kollege Peter Pesel neue Ideen für schwere Zeiten plakativ darstellen. Ich hoffe, es waren heute wertvolle Informationen für Sie dabei. Falls es noch Fragen gibt, wir haben natürlich immer die Möglichkeit, auch im Nachhinein auf diese noch genauer einzugehen. Ich möchte hier noch einen kurzen Hinweis auf unsere Ressourcen geben. Sie können selbstverständlich sich auch über unsere Website zu den künftigen Veranstaltungen informieren. Wir haben auch weitere Webinare auf unserem YouTube-Channel für Sie bereits bereitgestellt. Ich bedanke mich noch einmal und wünsche Ihnen einen wunderschönen Montagabend. Stay healthy.